urgent. The way Iran is still managing to breathe, even under the devastating blockade imposed by the United States in Hormuz, has been discovered. What many had been treating as an almost total siege now reveals a strategic opening in the north, through which the regime tries to maintain part of its logistical, commercial, and operational support. Instead of relying only on the most heavily monitored passage on the planet, Tehran began to rely on a less exposed route connected to Russia to buy time and avoid a faster collapse. This shows that the American pressure in Hormuz hit the heart of the Iranian structure, but it also exposed the alternative route that still keeps the regime standing amid an increasingly suffocating crisis. This Saturday, April 18, 2026, the main point is no longer just the passage of ships in the Gulf. The focus also includes a less talked about corridor, but one that is increasingly important for the logistical survival of Tehran. What is actually happening? The United States has begun creating conditions for mine removal in the Strait of Hormuz, and the US Navy itself reported on April 11 that 2 warships crossed the area precisely to prepare for this operation. But even after the Iranian announcement that the passage was open, the risk remains. It remained high. On Friday, April 17, a naval warning seen by Reuters said that the threat of mines in parts of the strait was still not fully understood and that avoiding the area should be considered. Who is at the center of this story? On one side, the Iranian regime and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard. On the other, the United States, which has increased military and maritime pressure. In the middle of this, Russia and Israel come in. Russia, because it has strengthened the use of the Caspian Sea as a trade route to Iran. Israel, because it claimed in March to have hit Iranian naval targets in the Caspian itself in an action that showed that not even the northern corridor is out of the war's reach. And why does this matter so much? In the south, the Strait of Hormuz remains the most sensitive point on the planet for energy and trade. But in the north, the Caspian Sea has gained importance because it became an emergency route. When Hormuz is blocked, becomes more expensive, or turns into a constant threat, Tehran looks for another way to maintain the flow of cargo, food, and economic support. That's exactly what Reuters showed in March. Russian companies resumed grain exports to Iran through the Caspian Sea. And this route came to be seen as the safest for trade with the Iranians after the closure of Hormuz. How does this corridor work? It doesn't completely replace Hormuz, but it buys time for the regime. 5 ships were being loaded at the Russian port of Astrakhan with about 22,600 tons of grain, while another 9 were waiting to be unloaded near the Iranian coast, according to Reuters. This shows a harsh truth. War is not sustained only with missiles, drones, and speeches. War also depends on ports, ships, cargo, insurance, and open routes. When the South comes under threat, the North becomes oxygen. And it's precisely this breathing room that Iran doesn't want to see clearly exposed to the world. When you observe the movement of the ships, the picture becomes even more revealing. On Friday, about 20 vessels tried to cross Hormuz after the announcement of the reopening, but many stopped or turned back. This shows that the fear is still real. The passage may even be announced as open, but real security is still far from being guaranteed. And it is in this gap between rhetoric and reality that the regime tries to gain leverage, imposing coordination with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard and creating lanes that Iran itself calls safe. Why does this route connected to Russia cause so much discomfort? Because it reduces, even if only partially, the immediate effect of the maritime blockade in the south. If Hormuz is the visible jugular, the Caspian is the hidden vein. It doesn't solve everything, but it prevents a rapid collapse. And that explains why Moscow reacted so clearly when the war reached that area. On March 24, the Kremlin said it would view any spillover of the conflict into the Caspian Sea extremely negatively. That statement was not made by chance. It shows that this area has become a sensitive zone for both Russian and Iranian interests at the same time. There is another decisive point. The market already understands that the crisis is not over. Reuters reported on April 15 that tanker traffic through Hormuz remained below pre-war levels. And an analysis published on the 13th stated that the closure of the strait by Iran broke a decades-old pattern and changed the risk calculation in the region. In other words, even when there is a truce, the strategic damage continues. The world has come to see that Tehran is willing to use this passage as a weapon, and that's why any alternative route immediately becomes valuable to the regime. In the end, the most important question is simple. Why doesn't Iran want this route to be the center of the conversation? Because it reveals weakness. It shows that the regime under pressure in the south needs to seek support in the north. It reveals growing dependence on Russia. It shows that the rhetoric of strength hides an urgent need to keep supplies coming, keep the flow going, and buy time. And it also shows that the dispute is no longer just about a famous strait. Now it involves the entire map of Iranian survival. When did this gain momentum? In recent weeks, as the war has spread, and with Russia resuming exports through the north. In the end, what has come to light is serious for the regime and revealing for the world. The way Iran is still staying afloat is no longer a secret. Even with the heavy US blockade in Hormuz, Tehran tries to survive by using a parallel route to keep things flowing, maintain supplies, and stay connected to its allies. But once this safety valve is discovered, it stops being advantageous. Silenciosa e vira ponto de pressão. And that's exactly where the scenario changes. The Iranian regime remains alive, but now it struggles to breathe under surveillance and with less and less room to hide the source of the oxygen, still keeping it from total suffocation.